I'm currently staring at a settlement check for $2 million, but my hands are shaking so hard I cannot even deposit it. The man who signed it thinks he is paying to keep me quiet about his family's embezzlement. He has no idea that I already handed the digital evidence to the district attorney 45 minutes ago. They are popping champagne at their estate right now, completely unaware that the SWAT team is currently turning onto their private driveway. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air in the emergency room always tasted like copper and bleach, a metallic tang that coated the back of your throat and refused to leave until you were 3 showers deep into your weekend. It was nearing midnight on a Tuesday, the kind of stagnant, heavy hour where time seemed to drip rather than flow. I was standing at the nurse's station staring at a styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. The surface of the black liquid had that oily, iridescent sheen that warned you it was going to taste like battery acid, but I drank it anyway. I needed the caffeine to jumpstart my heart. My scrubs were sticking to my lower back. I had just spent 40 minutes suturing a laceration on a construction worker who had been too confident with a table saw, and the mental fatigue was starting to set in. It wasn't the blood that tired me out anymore. After 5 years as an attending physician, blood was just another fluid, like oil in a mechanic's shop. It was the noise, the constant rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitors, the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum, the distant muffled sobbing coming from the waiting room. It was a chaotic symphony that never ended. I crumpled the cup and tossed it into the overflowing trash bin, the sound of the styrofoam hitting the plastic liner echoing slightly in the lull. I rubbed my temples, trying to massage away the headache that had been throbbing behind my eyes since my shift started. I just wanted 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to sit in the break room, close my eyes, and pretend I wasn't responsible for keeping people alive. I looked at the clock on the wall. 11:45 at night. Cameron, my husband, had texted me at 6, saying he was meeting a client for a late dinner and would be home after I got off shift. I pictured him in his suit, charming some investor, flashing that smile that had convinced me to pay off his student loans 3 years ago. I checked my phone. No new messages. That was typical. He was probably deep in conversation, or maybe he had already gone home and fallen asleep, leaving the porch light on for me. I put the phone back in my pocket, feeling the weight of it against my hip. I took a deep breath, inhaling the antiseptic air, and prepared to head toward the break room. I didn't even make it 3 steps before the red phone at the charge nurse's desk let out that shrill, piercing ring that stopped everyone in their tracks. It wasn't a normal ringtone. It was a harsh, mechanical buzz that signaled a trauma alert. Chandra, the charge nurse, snatched the receiver up before the first ring finished. Her face, usually a mask of bored indifference, tightened instantly. I stopped walking. My body went into autopilot, the exhaustion vanishing behind a flood of adrenaline. I watched her hand grip the pen, scribbling furiously on the notepad. "ETA," she barked into the phone. "Copy, we are ready." She slammed the phone down and looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. "Dr. Calloway, we have a code 3 incoming. 2 victims. High-speed T-bone collision at the intersection of 4th and Main. ETA 2 minutes. "Status?" I asked, my voice snapping into command mode as I grabbed a fresh pair of gloves from the dispenser on the wall. I snapped them on, the latex popping against my wrists. "Male and female," Chandra listed, coming around the desk. "Male driver, unrestrained, head trauma, GCS 9. Female passenger, restrained, but showing signs of hypovolemic shock. BP is 60/40 and dropping. They are coming in hot. Get trauma bay 1 and 2 open," I ordered, moving toward the ambulance bay doors. "I need 2 units of O- primed and ready in both bays. Page respiratory and get the portable X-ray down here now." The automatic doors slid open, letting in a gust of humid, exhaust-filled night air. The sirens were deafening now, growing louder with every second until they were practically vibrating in my chest. I stood there, a soldier waiting for the war to come to her, flanked by 2 nurses and a resident who looked like he was about to throw up. Deep breath, Miller, I told the resident without looking at him. Don't lock your knees. The ambulance lights washed over the concrete ramp in blinding flashes of red and white. The first rig screeched to a halt, followed immediately by the second. The back doors flew open, and the paramedics began unloading the stretchers. Male, 32, blunt force trauma to the cranium. The first paramedic shouted over the noise of the idling engines. BP is stable, but he's confused. Female, late 20s, rigid abdomen, tachycardia. The second paramedic yelled, pushing the other stretcher past me. She's crashing, Doc! We rolled them into the trauma bays, the wheels clattering loudly on the floor. I followed the female patient into Bay 1 because her blood pressure was critical. She was the priority. Transfer on 3, I shouted. 1, 2, 3. We heaved her from the paramedic board onto the hospital bed. She was a mess. Her long, dark hair was matted with blood and glass, covering her face. She was wearing a dress that had been ripped open at the shoulder and side from the impact. Cut the clothes, I ordered, grabbing the trauma shears. I need access to the abdomen. I jammed the scissors under the fabric of the dress at her waist and began to cut upward. The fabric was expensive. I could feel the quality of the silk against my fingertips. It was a deep, rich crimson red. As I sliced through the bodice, my brain snagged on a detail that didn't make sense. The silk had a specific, subtle pattern woven into it, tiny, almost invisible jacquard roses. I froze for a fraction of a second. I knew this fabric. I knew this dress. I had special ordered this dress from a boutique in Milan 3 months ago as a birthday gift for my sister-in-law, Zoe. It had cost me nearly $800. I looked up at the patient's face. A nurse was wiping away the blood to attach the oxygen mask. The wipe cleared the forehead and the eyes. It was Zoe, my sister-in-law, the woman I treated like a younger sister, the woman who I paid tuition for. She was lying on my table, bleeding out in the dress I bought her. "Dr. Calloway?" the nurse asked, noticing my hesitation. I shook my head, forcing the shock down into a dark box in my mind. "I'm clear," I said, my voice sounding tinny in my own ears. "Start the fluids." I turned to look through the glass partition into Trauma Bay 2. They were cutting the shirt off the male driver. I could see his chest, the familiar pattern of hair, the scar on his left shoulder from a surfing accident in college. It was Cameron, my husband. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. My husband and his sister, together, at midnight, in a car crash, wearing formal wear. Dr. Calloway, Chandra shouted, snapping her fingers in front of my face. "Her pressure is bottoming out, 50/30. Time compressed into a singularity. I was standing in the center of a nightmare, with my husband in one room and his sister in the other. I looked at Cameron through the glass. He was groaning, thrashing slightly as they tried to restrain him. He was conscious. He was fighting. I looked down at Zoe. She was pale, her skin turning a terrifying shade of gray. She was silent. "Doctor, we need orders." Miller, the resident, yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Do you want to take the mail? He's asking for you." I looked at Miller. "What?" "The male patient," Miller said. "He's mumbling Steph. That's you, right?" I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. Cameron was calling for me. Of course he was. He always called for me when he needed something fixed. When he needed money, when he needed validation, when he needed a problem to go away. But I looked at the monitors. Cameron's heart rate was elevated, but his rhythm was sinus. Zoe's monitor was screaming a lethal arrhythmia warning. She was bleeding internally. If I didn't open her up in the next 5 minutes, she would be a corpse. "Dr. Calloway, the husband," a nurse started. "He is stable," I said, my voice turning into a block of ice. "She is dying. Prep Bay 1 for immediate exploratory laparotomy. I'm taking her." The room went silent for a beat. The nurses exchanged glances. They knew who these people were. They had seen Cameron at the hospital Christmas party. They knew this was my husband. Are you sure, doctor? Chandra asked softly. We can get Dr. Tate for the girl. You can be with your husband. Dr. Tate is 20 minutes out, I snapped, grabbing a laryngoscope to intubate Zoe. If we wait for him, she dies. I am the attending on shift. I am taking the critical patient. Get the male a CT of the head and spine. Keep him sedated if he's combative. Do not let him up. I leaned over Zoe, tilting her head back to slide the blade into her throat. I wasn't making a wife's choice. I was making a doctor's choice. And God help me, I was also making a choice to save the witness so I could find out why the hell she was in my husband's car. Tube is in, I announced, inflating the cuff. Connect the bag. I grabbed the stethoscope and leaned down to listen to her chest, ensuring the airway was secure. I placed the cold metal disc against her chest, right over her heart. It was beating wildly, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. As I leaned in close, my face inches from her neck, a scent hit me. It cut through the metallic smell of blood and the chemical sting of antiseptic. It was a heavy, floral perfume with notes of jasmine and rose. Chanel No. 5, limited edition. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might vomit right onto the sterile field. I knew that smell. I knew it intimately because I had bought that exact bottle for myself 6 months ago. It was a reward for surviving a particularly brutal flu season. I had left it on my vanity, still in the box. 2 weeks ago, I had gone to open it and the box was empty. When I had asked Cameron about it, he had shrugged, not even looking up from his phone. Maybe the cleaning lady took it, he had said. Or maybe you misplaced it, Steph. You're always so scattered lately. I had believed him. I had actually apologized for being scattered. Now that scent was radiating off my sister-in-law's neck. It wasn't just the perfume, it was the quantity. She was drenched in it. It was the scent of a woman who had dressed up for a date, not a casual car ride with her brother. I pulled back, my hands trembling slightly before I forced them to still. The pieces were clicking together in my mind. The red dress, the perfume, the late night, the lies. It was a physical blow, heavier than any punch. Doctor? Miller asked, watching me closely. I blinked, clearing the image of the empty perfume box from my mind. Breath sounds are equal, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a radio in another room. Let's move. To the OR. Now. The transition to the operating room was a blur of motion and lights. Once the doors sealed behind us, the world narrowed down to the sterile blue drape and the square of illuminated flesh in the center. Scalpel, I said, extending my hand. The instrument slapped into my palm. I took a breath and made the incision. My hand was steady. It was terrifying how steady it was. My husband was lying in a trauma bay with a brain injury, and his mistress, because that's what she was, I couldn't deny it anymore, was under my knife. I compartmentalized. I built a wall of brick and mortar in my mind. On one side was Stephanie the wife, who was currently screaming and smashing things. On the other side was Dr. Calloway, who had a job to do. Suction, I ordered. There's a lot of free fluid. The abdomen was full of blood. I worked quickly, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. I located the source of the bleeding, a grade 4 splenic rupture. Her spleen was shattered. We need to clamp the splenic artery, I said. Give me a vascular clamp, large. As I worked, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor became a metronome. Beep, beep, beep. Liar, liar, liar. I dissected the tissue, isolating the vessels. I could have made a mistake. A slip of the wrist, a hesitation, it would be so easy. A complication during surgery. No one would question it. Her injuries were severe. The thought flashed through my mind, dark and seductive. I could let her die. I looked at the clamp in my hand. I looked at the bleeding vessel. Then I clamped the artery. The bleeding stopped. I wasn't a murderer. I was a doctor. And I needed her alive. Dead people can't answer questions. Dead people can't confess. I tied off the vessels, my knots tight and secure. I removed the damaged spleen. I checked the liver, the bowel. No other major injuries. "Lavage and close," I said after 40 minutes. "She's stable." I stepped back from the table, peeling off my blood-soaked gown. My scrubs underneath were drenched in sweat. I felt hollowed out, like a pumpkin carved for Halloween. I had saved her life. Now I had to go face the people who had destroyed mine. The scrub sink water was freezing, but I kept my hands under the stream until my knuckles turned white. I was scrubbing away Zoe's blood, but the sensation of her internal organs was still ghosted onto my fingertips. I turned the faucet off with my elbow and grabbed a rough brown paper towel, drying my hands with jerky, aggressive movements. I pushed through the swinging doors of the surgical wing, expecting silence. Instead, I walked straight into an ambush. Ophelia, my mother-in-law, was standing right in the center of the hallway. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't crying. She was standing perfectly still, clutching her pearl-handled purse with both hands, her knuckles bleached of color. She was wearing her emergency outfit, a cashmere cardigan and pressed slacks, looking like she was about to attend a board meeting rather than a trauma ward. "Where is she?" Ophelia demanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had that razor-wire frequency that cut straight through the ambient hospital noise. "Zoe is in recovery," I said, stopping 3 feet away from her. I was too tired to put on the dutiful daughter-in-law mask. She had a ruptured spleen. I had to remove it. She's stable, but... The movement was so fast I didn't even see her shoulder drop. Crack. My head snapped to the left. The sound of her palm hitting my cheek echoed off the linoleum floors like a gunshot. The sting was immediate and hot, spreading from my cheekbone down to my jaw. I stumbled back a step, my hand flying up to cover the impact site. "You monster!" Ophelia hissed. She stepped into my personal space, smelling of lavender laundry detergent and mints. "You left my son, your husband, rotting in a hallway with brain damage so you could play hero to the girl you've always been jealous of." I stared at her, my mouth tasting like copper where my tooth had cut the inside of my cheek. "Jealous? Ophelia, she was bleeding internally. Cameron has a concussion. I followed protocol." "Protocol?" She scoffed, her eyes wide and manic. "Don't give me your medical jargon. I know you, Stephanie. You saw a chance to have Zoe under your knife, helpless. You took your sweet time, didn't you? Did you make sure to leave a nice big scar?" "I saved her life," I shouted, my voice finally cracking. "She was minutes away from death. And why were they together, Ophelia? Why was she in a cocktail dress in his car at midnight?" Ophelia didn't blink. She didn't flinch. "Don't you dare try to deflect your incompetence with your paranoid accusations. You're a cold, barren woman, Stephanie, and now you've hurt my family because you can't stand that they have a bond you'll never understand." "Mrs. Johnson!" The voice boomed down the corridor. Dr. Turner, the chief of surgery and my mentor for the last 7 years, was storming toward us. He was a large man, 6'4" with broad shoulders, and right now he looked ready to throw someone through a window. Ophelia froze. Her hand, which had been raised as if to strike again, dropped to her side instantly. Her posture shifted. Her shoulders slumped, her chin wobbled. In the span of a second, she transformed from a viper into a grieving, terrified mother. "Doctor." "Turner," Ophelia sobbed, reaching out a hand toward him. "Thank God, please tell me the truth. Stephanie, she won't tell me if my baby is alive." Turner didn't take her hand. He stepped between us, using his body as a shield. He looked at the red welt forming on my cheek, his jaw tightening, then turned his gaze on Ophelia. "I witnessed the entire interaction from the nurse's station, Mrs. Johnson," Turner said, his voice dangerously low. "Assaulting a physician is a felony. In this hospital, it results in an immediate ban from the premises. Do I need to call security, or are you going to take a seat in the waiting room and stay there?" Ophelia gaped at him, her act faltering. She prioritized the wrong patient. Your son is stable in Bay 4 waiting for a CT scan, Turner interrupted. Dr. Calloway performed a life-saving splenectomy on your daughter in record time. If she had delayed by 5 minutes to hold your son's hand, you would be planning a funeral right now. Is that what you wanted? Ophelia paled. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom, hidden from Turner's view by the angle of her head. I'm so distraught, Ophelia whispered, dabbing at dry eyes. I don't know what I'm doing. Please forgive a mother's panic. Turner pointed down the hall. Waiting room, now. If you approach Dr. Calloway again, you will be removed by force. Ophelia nodded quickly and scurried away, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. She didn't look back. Turner turned to me, inspecting my face. You okay, Steph? Do you want ice for that? I'm fine, I lied, though my face was throbbing. I need to go log the patient's belongings. It's policy. Turner looked at me for a long beat. He knew I was deflecting. Go. Take 20 minutes. If you need me to cover the floor, I'm here. I walked to the administration office on the ground floor. It was a small, windowless room that smelled of stale toner and lemon pledge. The clerk, a woman named Brenda who had worked the night shift since the 90s, was slowly eating a yogurt. Dr. Calloway, Brenda said around a plastic spoon. Need something? The personal effects for the traumas in Bay 1 and 2, I said, leaning against the counter to stop my legs from shaking. Cameron Johnson and Zoe Johnson. I'm the attending. I need to catalog them for the chart. It was a half lie. Nurses usually did the logging, but as the spouse, I had rights to Cameron's things, and as the doctor, I had access to Zoe's. Brenda sighed, put down her spoon, and swiveled her chair to the metal shelving unit behind her. She took her time, scanning the labels. The crinkle of the heavy plastic evidence bags sounded like thunder in the small room. Here, she said, dropping 2 clear bags onto the counter. Heavy wallets on both of them. Rich folks, huh? Yeah, I muttered. Something like that. I grabbed the bags and walked to the far corner of the doctor's lounge, which was empty at this hour. I sat at the round table and stared at the bags. Cameron's bag contained his watch, a Rolex I had bought him for our anniversary, his phone, which was smashed, and his leather wallet. Zoe's bag held a clutch, a broken iPhone with a glitter case, and a singular diamond earring. I opened Cameron's bag first. My hands were trembling so bad I had to rip the plastic to get it open. The smell of his cologne wafted out, sandalwood and expensive scotch. It made me nauseous. I dumped the contents onto the table. The phone was dead, the screen a spiderweb of cracks. I picked up the wallet. It was warm, pliable leather. I opened the bifold wallet. The first thing I saw was his driver's license. Cameron Michael Johnson. He looked so smug in the photo. I pulled out the credit cards, the joint Visa, his corporate Amex, a black card I didn't recognize. I flipped through the cash slot. Empty. Cameron never carried cash. Then I checked the hidden pocket behind the coin pouch. Men always put the things they wanted to hide behind the coin pouch. I fished out a crumpled piece of thermal paper. I smoothed it out on the table. The Serenity Spa and Resort. Guest, Mr. and Mrs. Cameron Johnson. Room, Presidential Suite. Check-in, Friday, October 12th. Check-out, Sunday, October 14th. Total, $3,450. The date was this coming weekend. They had prepaid for a getaway. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Client dinner, I whispered to the empty room. My ass. I looked back at the wallet. There was something white sticking out from behind his license in the clear plastic window. I used my fingernail to pry the license out. Behind it was a photo. It was a small wallet-sized print, the edges worn soft. It was Zoe. She was wearing a white string bikini, standing on a beach I didn't recognize, laughing at the camera. Her hand was reaching out toward the photographer. I flipped the photo over. In Cameron's handwriting, scrawled in blue ink, "My Z forever." The air left the room. This wasn't a new affair. The photo was worn. He had been carrying this for months, maybe years. While I was working 80-hour weeks to pay the mortgage on the house Ophelia insisted we buy, Cameron was carrying a photo of his sister in a bikini in his pocket. I needed to know where the money for the Serenity Spa had come from. $3,000 wasn't a small amount, even for us. I pulled out my own phone and tapped the icon for our bank, First National. The blue loading circle spun and spun. Login failed, invalid username or password. I frowned. I hadn't changed the password. It was my birthday plus the dog's name. I typed it in again, slowly. Login failed. "You son of a bitch," I hissed. I hit the forgot password link. A verification code has been sent to the mobile number ending in 4490. That was Cameron's number. The smashed phone sitting uselessly on the table in front of me. He had changed the two-factor authentication to his device. I couldn't reset it without his phone. I stood up and paced the small lounge. I had to call the bank. I looked at the clock, 1 in the morning. The fraud department was 24/7, but the wait times would be horrific. I grabbed my phone and ducked into the supply closet attached to the lounge. It was cramped, smelling of wet mops and industrial bleach. I sat on a bucket of floor wax and dialed the 1-800 number on the back of my debit card. "Thank you for calling First National," a robotic female voice chirped. "For English, press 1. I pressed 1. "Please enter your 16-digit card number." I typed it in. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Please enter your 16-digit card number." "God damn it," I whispered, typing it again, harder this time. "Thank you. Please say your reason for calling. You can say balance, transfer, or fraud." "Fraud," I said clearly. "I heard funds. Is that correct?" "No," I hissed. "Fraud. Representative. Please hold while I connect you. Your estimated wait time is 45 minutes." I put the phone on speaker and set it on a shelf between 2 boxes of toilet paper. I sat there in the dark, my knees pulled to my chest, listening to the tinny jazz hold music, staring at the mop bucket. Every second felt like a year. Every second Ophelia was plotting, Cameron was waking up, and I was sitting in a closet. 30 minutes later, a miracle, the music cut out. "First National Fraud Department, this is Marcus, ID number 412. How can I help you?" "Hi, Marcus," I said, my voice shaking. "My name is Dr. Stephanie Calloway. I'm locked out of my joint account with my husband, Cameron Johnson. I suspect compromised activity." "Okay, Dr. Calloway, I need to verify your identity. Can you give me your social and mother's maiden name?" I gave him the information. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Okay, you're verified," Marcus said. "I see the account here. I see a password change and a contact update made. Yesterday at 4 p.m. Was that you?" "No," I said. "That was not me." "Okay, I can revert access to your email, but looking at the activity..." "Ma'am, are you aware of the transfer made this morning?" My stomach dropped. "What transfer?" "A wire transfer initiated at 9 a.m. for $50,000, Marcus read. "It cleared an hour ago." 50,000, I choked out. That was our entire savings. That was the emergency fund. That was the money for the roof repair. "Where did it go?" "It went to a savings account at Chase Bank," Marcus said. "The account nickname listed on the transfer memo is ZJ Savings. ZJ Zoe Johnson. He emptied our life savings. He gave it to her. $50,000. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. I didn't pick it up. I just sat there in the dark, surrounded by the smell of bleach, and tried to remember how to breathe. They hadn't just cheated on me. They had robbed me. They had planned to take the money, go to the spa, and leave me with nothing but a mortgage I paid for. "Ma'am?" Marcus's voice came tinny from the floor. "Ma'am, are you still there? Should I freeze the account?" I picked up the phone. My hand was surprisingly steady now. The shaking had stopped. It was replaced by a cold, heavy weight in the center of my chest. "Freeze it, Marcus," I said. "Freeze everything. And email me those statements immediately." I walked down the hallway toward the post-anesthesia care unit, my heels striking the floor with a rhythm that felt like a war drum. I had the printout of the bank fraud email folded into a sharp square in my pocket, its edges biting into my palm. The PACU was dimmer than the rest of the hospital, a quiet purgatory between the violence of surgery and the reality of the ward. I scanned the curtained bays until I found Bay 6. I pulled back the curtain. Zoe was awake. She was groggy, her eyelids heavy from the anesthesia, but she was awake. She looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and wires. Her face was pale, almost translucent without the layers of makeup she usually wore. "Steph," she croaked, her voice dry and cracking. She tried to lick her lips, but her tongue was swollen. "Water." I didn't move to get the pitcher. I stood at the foot of her bed, arms crossed, staring at her. I wasn't seeing a patient anymore. I was seeing the thief who had stolen $50,000 from my family. "The nurse will be here in a minute," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. Zoe blinked, trying to focus on me. "It hurts," she whined. "My stomach, it burns." "You had a splenectomy, Zoe," I said clinically. "I cut you open from your sternum to your navel to stop you from bleeding to death. It's going to hurt." She flinched at the brutality of the description. You did the surgery?" "Yes," I said. I took a step closer to the side of the bed. "I saved your life. While you were lying there, helpless, I fixed you. And do you know what I found while I was scrubbing out?" Zoe's eyes widened slightly. The fog of the drugs was lifting, replaced by a flicker of fear. "What?" I leaned down, bringing my face close to hers. I could smell the lingering scent of antiseptic and the stale fear sweat. "I found the receipt for the Serenity Spa," I whispered. "Presidential suite. This weekend. $3,450. Paid for by my husband." Zoe's breath hitched. The heart rate monitor next to the bed sped up. Beep, beep, beep. "And I found the transfer," I continued, relentless. $50,000 to ZJ Savings. Tell me, Zoe, how are you planning to spend my retirement fund? A new car? More limited edition perfume?" "I didn't," Zoe stammered, her hands clutching the thin hospital blanket. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I hissed. "Not while I control your pain management chart. I saw the bank records, Zoe. Marcus from the fraud department sent them to me 20 minutes ago. It's a felony, wire fraud, grand larceny." The monitor was pinging faster now, a frantic beep, 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 beep that filled the small cubicle. Zoe's chest was heaving, her skin, already pale, turned a sickly shade of gray. "I can't breathe," she gasped. "Steph, I can't." My chest. She was having a panic attack. I watched her struggle for air, her eyes darting around the room looking for an escape that didn't exist. Part of me, the doctor part, knew I should calm her down. Tachycardia wasn't good for a fresh surgical site. But the other part of me, the wife who had been played for a fool, wanted her to feel every ounce of this terror. "Your heart rate is 140, I observed, looking at the screen. "You're stressing your incision. If you pop a stitch, you'll bleed internally again. Do you want to go back to the OR, Zoe?" "No," she sobbed, tears leaking out of the corners of her eyes. "Please, stop." "Then tell me the truth," I demanded. "Why did he give you the money? Why were you together tonight?" "It wasn't me," Zoe cried out, her voice rising in pitch. "It wasn't my idea. I told him not to. I told him you would find out." "Who?" I grabbed the bed rail, the metal cold under my fingers. "Cameron?" "Cameron isn't smart enough to hide 50 grand without help. Who planned it?" Zoe was hyperventilating now, short, shallow gasps that sounded like a drowning animal. "Mom," she wheezed. "It was Mom." I froze. Ophelia. Zoe nodded frantically, her head thrashing against the pillow. She set up the account. She made Cameron transfer the money. She said we needed a nest egg for when we left. Left? I felt the blood drain from my face. Left where? Left you, Zoe whispered. The confession hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Mom said you were just a placeholder, that you were dry, barren. She said Cameron needed a real woman, someone who could give the family a legacy. I stared at her, my mind reeling. I knew Ophelia didn't like me. I knew she made snide comments about my career and my failure to produce a grandchild. But this was orchestrated. This was a conspiracy. So you're the real woman? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. His sister? Adopted, Zoe practically shouted. I'm adopted, Steph. We aren't blood. Mom always said it didn't matter. She said we were soulmates, that we belonged together. I felt sick, physically sick. Ophelia had groomed them. She had encouraged an affair between her son and her adopted daughter because she wanted to keep the bloodline, or the money, tightly controlled within her grasp. And I was just the ATM, the bankroll. So the money, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The $50,000, that was for what? A house? A down payment, Zoe admitted, squeezing her eyes shut. On a condo in Buckhead. Mom found it. We were going to put the offer in on Monday. Monday, 2 days from now. They were going to steal my savings, buy a love nest, and leave me with nothing. And tonight, I asked, why the crash? We were celebrating, Zoe sobbed. The transfer cleared. We went to dinner, we had champagne. Cameron, he was so happy. He said we were finally free. Free, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. You were celebrating stealing my life savings. Zoe looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. She looked terrified, but there was something else in her expression. Desperation. Steph, she whispered. Her hand moved down to her abdomen, resting gingerly over the thick bandage where I had sliced her open. Is the baby okay? The world stopped. The background noise of the hospital, the rolling carts, the distant pages, the hum of the ventilation, vanished into a vacuum of silence. What? I asked. The baby, Zoe said, tears spilling fresh tracks down her cheeks. I was 12 weeks along. I didn't tell the paramedics because I was scared Mom would find out before we announced it. But my stomach, it hurt so bad in the car. I stared at her hand on her stomach. 12 weeks. That was the end of the first trimester. I hadn't checked for a pregnancy. I hadn't run a beta HCG. Why would I? She was a trauma patient with a shattered spleen. I focused on the life-threatening hemorrhage. But then the medical reality crashed into me. A high-impact T-bone collision, the seatbelt sign across her abdomen, the massive internal bleeding. Zoe, I said, my voice barely a whisper, you had a massive abdominal trauma. Your spleen ruptured. There was a lot of blood in the cavity. Did you check? She begged, trying to sit up, wincing in pain. Did you save it? I remembered the surgery. I remembered the uterus. It had looked normal, firm. But at 12 weeks, it would barely be palpable above the pelvic brim. If she had miscarried due to the impact, the evidence would have been mixed with the liters of blood from the spleen. I didn't know, I said. I didn't look, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. The amount of trauma required to shatter a spleen would have been catastrophic for a 12-week pregnancy. No, Zoe wailed. It was a low, guttural sound that ripped out of her throat. No, 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 it was a boy. We knew it was a boy. I backed out of the curtain. I couldn't listen to it. I couldn't watch her mourn the child she created with my husband. I turned and walked fast, then jogged, then ran toward the staff bathroom at the end of the hall. I slammed the door and locked it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely slide the bolt. I made it to the sink just as my stomach convulsed. I dry heaved over the basin, nothing coming up but acid and bile. I gripped the porcelain edges until my knuckles turned blue, gasping for air. A baby. They made a baby. For 5 years, Cameron and I had tried. We had done the charts, the temperatures, the ovulation kits. Every month when the test was negative, he would sigh, a heavy, disappointed sound that made me feel like a broken machine. "Maybe next month, Steph," he would say, turning away in bed. He wasn't disappointed. He was relieved, because he was already planning a family with her. I splashed cold water on my face, letting it drip down my chin and onto my scrubs. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. My hair was escaping its bun in frizzy strands. I looked pathetic. I looked like a victim. "Stop it," I told my reflection. My voice was harsh in the tiled room. "Stop crying." I grabbed a paper towel and scrubbed my face dry. The friction hurt, stinging where Ophelia had slapped me. I wasn't going to be the sad, barren wife. I wasn't going to let them win. They had taken my money, my trust, and my dignity. But I had something they didn't. I had the truth. And I was the only one standing. Cameron was brain-addled. Zoe was bedridden. Ophelia was banned from the floor. I was the only one with mobility. I was the only one with a plan. I tossed the paper towel into the trash. It hit the bottom with a soft thud. I walked out of the bathroom with my spine straight. I checked the time on the wall clock, 3 a.m. Ophelia had been banished to the main waiting room downstairs, but I knew Silas, my father-in-law, would be somewhere else. Silas was a quiet man, a retired architect who spent most of his time in his study or playing golf. He usually let Ophelia run the show, nodding along to her edicts like a tired dog. I found him in the surgical waiting alcove on the 3rd floor. He was sitting alone on a vinyl bench, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I remembered, his gray suit rumpled. He didn't hear me approach. "Silas," I said softly. He jumped, his head snapping up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face gray with stubble. "Stephanie," he breathed, scrambling to stand up. "God, Stephanie, is he okay? Is Cameron—" "Cameron is stable," I said, keeping my distance. "He has a concussion and some bruising, but the CT scan was clear. No bleeds." Silas let out a long, shuddering breath and slumped back onto the bench. "Thank God. And Zoe?" "She's awake," I said. "She's in a lot of pain, but she'll live." Silas nodded, staring at his shoes. This is a nightmare. I don't know how this happened. A car crash? At midnight?" I watched him closely. Did he know? "Ophelia was the mastermind," Zoe said. "But Silas, he lived in that house. He paid the bills. Could he really be ignorant?" "It wasn't just a crash, Silas," I said, testing the waters. "I found a receipt in Cameron's wallet for a spa weekend with Zoe." Silas looked up, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "A spa? With Zoe?" "Yes," I said. "And Zoe just told me everything. She told me about the affair. She told me about Ophelia setting it up. She told me about the baby." Silas's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at me, his eyes wide with horror. "Baby? What baby?" "She was pregnant, Silas," I said, delivering the final blow. 12 weeks. She lost it in the crash. It was Cameron's. Silas's face crumbled. It wasn't the defensive anger of Ophelia. It was pure, unadulterated devastation. He buried his face in his hands and began to weep, deep, racking sobs that shook his entire frame. "Oh my God," he moaned. "Oh my God, Ophelia, what have you done?" I stood there watching him cry. He looked like a broken man. He looked like a victim, just like me. Or so I thought. Silas eventually stopped crying, but he didn't wipe his face. He just sat there, the tears drying in sticky tracks on his unshaven cheeks. He looked up at me, and the devastation in his eyes had hardened into something brittle and dangerous. "She always wanted this," Silas rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. Ophelia, she always said the bloodline was too thin, that we needed insurance. Insurance, I repeated, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Is that what she calls incest? Insurance? Silas flinched. He stood up slowly, his joints popping. He walked over to the vending machine, stared at his reflection in the glass, and then punched the metal frame. It was a dull, heavy thud. She controlled everything, Stephanie, he said, not looking at me. The money, the house, Cameron. I was just the wallet. And now she's turned my son into a criminal and my daughter into... He couldn't finish the sentence. He turned to face me. I can't let her get away with this. Not this time. She's destroyed them. I'm going to the police, Silas, I said firmly. I have the bank records. I have Zoe's confession. I'm going to bury her. No, Silas said quickly, stepping toward me. No, you can't. Not yet. Why? Are you protecting her? I'm protecting you, he insisted, his eyes wide. Ophelia has retained the firm of Davis and Lee for 20 years. If you go to the police with a groggy confession from a post-op patient and a bank transfer authorized by your husband, she will spin it. She'll say you're hysterical. She'll say it was a loan. She will bury you in litigation until you're bankrupt. I hesitated. He was right. Ophelia was a master manipulator. She would Darvo this until I looked like the crazy one. So what do? I asked. Just let them steal $50,000? No, Silas said. He reached out and awkwardly patted my shoulder. His hand was trembling. We trap her. We make her think she's won. When Ophelia thinks she's won, she gets sloppy. She brags. We need her to admit it when she thinks no one is listening. And how do we do that? I asked, shrugging his hand off. She hates me. She just slapped me in the hallway. Apologize, Silas said. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Excuse me? Go in there. Silas gestured toward the trauma bay. Play the part she wants. Be the broken, submissive wife. Tell her you were stressed. Tell her you're sorry you prioritized Zoe. Feed her ego. My stomach turned. I'd rather eat glass. Do you want your money back? Silas asked sharply. Do you want justice? Then you need to swallow your pride for 48 hours. If you fight her now, she walls up. If you submit, she opens the gates. I looked at him. He looked pathetic, desperate, and oddly sincere. He was a father watching his family implode. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. I'll play the part. But I need proof. Real proof. Not just hearsay. Cameron's phone, Silas whispered. He texts her everything. If Ophelia orchestrated this, the instructions are on his phone. It's smashed, I said. The screen is shattered. The SIM card isn't, Silas pointed out. Get the data. I'll keep Ophelia distracted with the victory. I nodded slowly. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one I had. Okay, I said. I'm going in. I walked back to the trauma bay. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took to suppress my rage. I stopped at the door to Bay 4. Ophelia was there. She had somehow talked her way back in, probably by threatening a nurse. She was sitting by Cameron's bedside, holding a plastic cup of ice chips. She was spoon-feeding him like he was a toddler. Cameron looked terrible. His head was wrapped in gauze, his face bruised purple and yellow. He looked up when I entered, and for a second I saw shame in his eyes. Then Ophelia turned. "Get out!" Ophelia spat. She didn't shout. She just ejected the words. "You've done enough damage." I forced my shoulders to slump. I forced my head to bow. I pinched the skin of my thigh through my pocket to summon tears. "Ophelia, please," I said, my voice trembling. I just wanted to check on him. I'm so sorry." Ophelia paused, the spoon hovering halfway to Cameron's mouth. She looked at me with suspicion, scanning my face for a trap. "Sorry?" she mocked. "Sorry for what? For leaving your husband brain damaged?" "For everything," I whined, stepping closer. I was panic-stricken. I didn't mean to snap at you. I've just been working so hard. I'm exhausted. I looked at Cameron. Cam, I'm sorry. I love you. Please, just tell me you're okay. Cameron opened his mouth, his eyes darting to his mother. Steph, he's fine, Ophelia interrupted, placing the cup down with a sharp clack. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at me, seeing the defeat in my posture, and a slow, reptilian smile spread across her face. Well, she said, sniffing, at least you have the decency to admit your failures. It's a start, Stephanie. But don't think this fixes anything. You have a long road to earn back your place in this family. I know, I whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. Good, Ophelia said, because once they are discharged, we are having a family dinner to celebrate their recovery and to discuss the future. You will be there, and you will be humble. I will, I promised. I'll be there. I backed out of the room, keeping my head down. As soon as the door closed, I straightened my spine. I felt dirty. I felt like I needed a chemical shower, but I had bought myself time. I went back to the doctor's lounge where I had left the evidence bags. It was 4 a.m. now. The hospital was in the deepest lull of the night. I grabbed Cameron's smashed phone from the table. I used a paper clip I found in the desk drawer to pop the SIM tray. It sprang open with a tiny click. I pulled the small chip out. It was intact. I didn't trust hospital Wi-Fi, and I didn't have a spare phone. I needed Nate. Nate was an IT specialist I had dated briefly in college, who now ran the hospital's server farm. He owed me a favor for stitching up his hand off the books after a bar fight last year. I texted him from my phone. Emergency. Need a SIM reader and a burner. Parking lot. B. 10 minutes. He replied instantly, on my way. I met him in his beat-up Honda Civic in the far corner of the employee lot. The air was humid and thick with the smell of rain. Nate looked tired, wearing a hoodie and pajama pants. You look like hell, Steph, he said, unlocking the passenger door. Thanks, I said, sliding in. Here. I handed him the chip. Nate pulled a chunky, ruggedized laptop from the back seat and plugged a card reader into the USB port. He slotted the SIM card in. What are we looking for? He asked, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Texts, I said. Deleted ones, between him and his mother, and him and Zoe. If they're on the SIM, I can get them, Nate said. If they're cloud-based, it's harder. He ran a script. Lines of code scrolled down the screen in green text. I watched, chewing my fingernail until it bled. Got him, Nate said after 3 agonizing minutes. He didn't wipe the local cache. Dumbass. He turned the screen toward me. It was a text thread with Mom. Ophelia, did you do the transfer? Cameron, yes, it's done, 50,000. Ophelia, good. Book the spa. Make sure she doesn't see the notification. Change the password. Cameron, I feel bad, Mom. It's her money. Ophelia, it's family money, and she isn't family. Z needs this. The baby needs this. I stared at the glowing screen. There it was. Conspiracy. Wire fraud. Can you export this? I asked Nate. Already did, he said, handing me a cheap burner phone. I cloned the SIM to this. You have access to everything as if you were him. Thank you, I said, clutching the burner phone. You just saved my life. I went home at 6 a.m. to shower and change. I slept for 2 hours, then woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was Ophelia. Family meeting, Saturday night, 7 o'clock, the estate. Don't be late, and wear something appropriate for once. She didn't ask. She ordered. I sat up in the empty bed. The sheets on Cameron's side were cold and perfectly made. He hadn't slept here in 2 days. I looked at the text again. Saturday night. That gave me 48 hours to prepare. I got up and walked to the closet. I pulled out the black dress I had worn to my father's funeral. It was modest, severe, and blended into the background. Perfect for the humble wife. Then I went to my laptop and plugged in the burner phone. I started organizing the files, the bank statements, the hotel receipt, the text logs. I created a PowerPoint presentation. I labeled it recovery. I wasn't just going to a dinner, I was going to an execution. Saturday night arrived with a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of my car as I drove up the long, winding driveway to the Johnson estate. The house was a sprawling monstrosity of brick and columns that screamed old money, even though I knew for a fact they were cash poor and leveraged to the hilt. I parked my 10-year-old sedan between a Mercedes and a Porsche. The windows of the house were glowing with warm, golden light. I could see silhouettes moving inside. I grabbed my purse. Inside was the burner phone and a USB drive. I walked up the front steps. The door was opened by a catering server before I could even knock. "Mrs. Johnson," the server said, nodding. "They are in the great room." I walked in. The house smelled of expensive lilies and roast beef. Ophelia had gone all out. There were fresh flowers on every surface, flowers that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I entered the great room. Ophelia was holding court by the fireplace. She was wearing a deep burgundy velvet gown that looked heavy and regal. She held a crystal wine glass, gesturing expansively to a group of aunts and uncles. Cameron was sitting in a wingback chair, looking pale but dressed in a sharp navy suit. And Zoe was sitting on the sofa surrounded by cousins. She was wearing a white dress. It was innocent, flowery, and virginal. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were hard. She didn't look like the crying girl in the hospital bed anymore. She looked like the favorite. "Ah," Ophelia said, her voice silencing the room. "Stephanie, you made it." She looked me up and down, taking in my plain black dress and lack of jewelry. She smiled, a predatory curling of her lips. "Grab a tray, dear," Ophelia said, pointing to the bar. "Help the servers. Make yourself useful." The room chuckled, a low, polite ripple of laughter at my expense. I didn't flinch. I walked to the bar, picked up a tray of champagne flutes, and turned to face them. "Of course, Ophelia," I said. "Anything for the family." The clinking of a silver spoon against crystal cut through the low hum of conversation. The room fell silent. Ophelia stood in front of the fireplace, the flames casting long, dancing shadows behind her. She looked magnificent and terrifying, like a queen about to order a beheading. "Family, friends," Ophelia began, her voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "Thank you for coming tonight. We have weathered a terrible storm. My son and my daughter were nearly taken from us." She paused for effect, dabbing a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. "But God is good," she continued. "They are here. They are healing." She gestured to Cameron and Zoe. Cameron stared at the floor. Zoe beamed, soaking up the attention. "However," Ophelia said, her tone hardening, "tragedy forces us to reevaluate our lives. It forces us to cut away the dead weight." She turned her eyes on me. I was standing by the bar holding a tray of empty glasses. The room followed her gaze. "Stephanie and Cameron have decided to part ways," Ophelia announced. A ripple of whispers broke out. I didn't move. "It is for the best. Stephanie has struggled to fit into this family. She has struggled to provide the one thing a family needs to survive. She meant a baby. She didn't say it, but everyone heard it. But we are the Johnsons," Ophelia declared. "We are generous. To help Stephanie start her new life, a life more suited to her station, we are gifting her a severance." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. She held it up. $15,000, she said loudly. "And of course, the house stays with Cameron, as it is family property. $15,000. My down payment on the house alone had been $75,000. I had paid the mortgage for 5 years. She was robbing me in front of 50 witnesses and calling it charity." Zoe giggled. It was a high, cruel sound. "Come here, Stephanie," Ophelia commanded, waving the check. "Come take your freedom." I put the tray down on the bar. The glass stems clattered against the wood. I walked slowly toward the fireplace. I could feel the eyes of every cousin, aunt, and business associate boring into my back. I stopped in front of Ophelia. I didn't take the check. $15,000, I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the sudden silence of the room. That is very generous, Ophelia. We think so, she sniffed, thrusting the paper at me. But I think there's an accounting error, I said. Before I accept, I prepared a little farewell video, a montage of my time here. May I? I held up the USB drive. Ophelia frowned, suspicious, but she couldn't say no without looking heartless in front of her guests. Make it quick, she snapped, then take the money and leave. I walked to the massive 80-inch smart TV mounted above the mantel. I plugged the drive into the side port. The screen flickered to life. I call this presentation Recovery, I said. I pressed play on the remote. The first image wasn't a wedding photo. It was a high-resolution scan of the bank transfer. Amount $50,000. From joint checking to ZJ Savings. Authorized by C. Johnson. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath. What is this? Ophelia screeched, lunging for the remote. I stepped in front of her. Sit down, Ophelia. I clicked the button again. The next image was the receipt. Serenity Spa Presidential Suite, Mr. and Mrs. Cameron Johnson. $3,000 for a weekend getaway, I narrated coldly, dated for this weekend, while I was working the night shift. Turn it off, Zoe screamed from the sofa. Turn it off. And finally, I said, clicking one more time, I pulled up the text log from the cloned SIM card. The instructions. Ophelia, transfer the money, she won't notice. We need the nest egg for the baby. You stole my life savings, I said, looking Ophelia in the eye. You authorized it. You planned it. And you did it to fund a new life for your son and his mistress. Lies, Ophelia shouted, her face turning a mottled purple. She forged it. She's jealous. She's crazy. She isn't crazy, Mrs. Johnson. The front door boomed open. Dr. E. Turner walked in, still wearing his white coat. Behind him were two uniformed police officers and a detective in a cheap suit. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Ophelia stumbled back, clutching the mantel for support. Dr. Turner, she whispered. What are you doing here? I'm here to deliver the toxicology report, Turner said, holding up a manila folder. And these officers are here to execute a warrant for wire fraud and conspiracy. He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped at Cameron's feet. Blood alcohol level of 0.18, Turner stated, twice the legal limit. You were drunk behind the wheel, Cameron. Your insurance is void. You are personally liable for the damage to the other vehicle and the hospital bills. Hospital bills? Ophelia scoffed, trying to regain her footing. We have excellent insurance. Not for criminal acts, the detective said, stepping forward. Drunk driving is a felony. Insurance doesn't cover felonies. You owe the hospital... Dr. Calloway, what's the estimate? With Zoe's surgery and ICU stay? I did the mental math. About $150,000. You're broke, I told Ophelia. The bank froze the stolen $50,000 this morning. You have no coverage, and you're about to be arrested. No, Ophelia shrieked. She looked wild, cornered. She turned on me. You did this, you barren witch. You couldn't give him a child, so you destroyed the one he made. She pointed a trembling finger at Zoe. She was pregnant. With the heir you couldn't provide. That's why we did it. To save the bloodline. Cameron was shaking. He was gripping the arms of his chair so hard the leather was creaking. Mom, stop, he whispered. No, Ophelia yelled. Tell them, Cameron. Tell them she was carrying your son. Tell them why we had to get rid of Stephanie. I can't, Cameron shouted. He stood up, swaying on his feet. Tears were streaming down his bruised face. I can't tell them that. Why not? Ophelia demanded. Are you a coward? Because I'm sterile, Cameron screamed. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence after the toast. It was a vacuum. What? Ophelia breathed. I had mumps complications when I was 20, Cameron sobbed, collapsing back into the chair. Orchitis. The doctor told me 3 years ago. I shoot blanks, Mom. I have 0 sperm count. 0. He looked at me. I never told you, Steph. I was too ashamed. I let you take the hormones. I let you think it was you, but it was me. It was always me. I stared at him. The years of negative tests, the monthly heartbreak. He had watched me cry in the bathroom for 5 years, knowing it was impossible. You knew? I whispered. You let me think I was broken. I'm sorry, he wept. My brain was processing the information at light speed. If Cameron was sterile... I turned slowly to face Zoe. She was frozen on the sofa, her face a mask of pure terror. If Cameron is sterile, I said, my voice cutting through the room, then who was the father of the baby you lost? Ophelia blinked rapidly. She looked from Cameron to Zoe. Zoe? What? Did you cheat on him? Who was it? Zoe didn't answer. She was looking at someone. She wasn't looking at Cameron. She wasn't looking at Ophelia. She was looking at Silas. Silas, my father-in-law, the man who had cried in the waiting room, the man who told me to apologize to Ophelia. He was standing in the shadows near the bookshelf. He wasn't crying now. He was staring at Zoe with a look of intense, terrifying warning. Don't say a word, Zoe, Silas said. His voice was low, calm, and utterly menacing. The pieces clicked. The insurance, the bloodline. Ophelia thought the insurance was a grandchild from her son. Silas meant something else entirely. It was you, I whispered. I grabbed the burner phone from my purse. I had only looked at the texts between Cameron and Ophelia. I hadn't checked the other threads. I scrolled frantically. There was a thread labeled Daddy. I opened it. Daddy. Don't worry about Ophelia. She's stupid. She thinks it's Cameron's. Daddy. Meet me at the boathouse tonight. Wear the red dress. Daddy. I'll take care of you. Once we get the money from Stephanie, we can go away. I felt bile rise in my throat. Oh my God, I said. I held up the phone. It wasn't Cameron. It was Silas. Shut up, Silas roared. He lunged across the room, knocking over a side table. Give me that phone. He was fast, but the detective was faster. As Silas reached for me, the detective tackled him mid-air. They crashed into the coffee table, shattering the glass top. Get off me, Silas screamed, thrashing. She's lying. That girl is a liar. Read it, I shouted, throwing the phone to Dr. Turner. Read the last text. Turner caught the phone. He looked at the screen. His face went pale. Sent yesterday, Turner read aloud. If Stephanie figures it out, we blame Ophelia. Just keep your mouth shut about the baby. I'll make sure you're taken care of, sweetheart. Ophelia let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a wail of pure agony. She looked at her husband, pinned to the floor by the police. She looked at the daughter she had adopted. Silas, she whimpered. You stupid cow. Silas spat from the floor, his face pressed against the rug. You were so obsessed with your legacy, you didn't even notice I was sleeping in the guest room for 10 years. You wanted a baby? I gave her a baby. Zoe curled into a ball on the sofa, sobbing hysterically. You're under arrest, the officer said, yanking Silas's arms behind his back. Incest, statutory rape, fraud, assault. They hauled him up. He glared at me as they dragged him out. You're dead, Stephanie. You're dead. I'm the only one alive in this room, I said. I looked around the wreckage of the party. Ophelia was catatonic on the floor. Cameron was weeping in his chair. Zoe was broken. I walked over to the TV and yanked my USB drive out. Dr. Turner, I said, I'm going home. I'll drive you, he said. I walked out the front door into the rain and I didn't look back. Update, 3 months later. It has been 90 days since the party. Silas is currently awaiting trial without bail. The DA added charges of embezzlement from his own company, which was the real reason they needed my money. He's looking at 20 years. Ophelia had a nervous breakdown. She is currently in a private psychiatric facility. The estate has been seized by the bank to pay off their debts. Cameron tried to reach out once. He sent a letter apologizing again for the infertility lie. He's working as a night manager at a motel off the interstate. I burned the letter without reading past the first paragraph. Zoe vanished. Rumor has it she moved to a halfway house in Tennessee. I don't wish her harm, but I never want to see her face again. She was a victim, yes, but she was also a willing participant in my destruction. As for me, I kept the condo in Buckhead. I sued the estate for the $50,000 and won, though getting the money will take years. But it doesn't matter. Dr. Turner, Nathan, asked me to dinner last week, not as a colleague. We went to a small Italian place. We didn't talk about the hospital. We didn't talk about the Johnsons. We talked about books. For the first time in 5 years, I breathed without feeling a weight on my chest. I'm 32 years old. I have my career. I have my dignity. And for the first time in a long time, I have peace. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.